we're joined by Big Phil, Philip Ingram MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. It's been a while since you and I had a catch-up, isn't it?
It has. It's been far too long, and we need to do it somewhere else with a glass of cider.
That's my language. Very good proposition there. I'll be saying yes. Let's talk now about the state of the Royal Navy, because we've learned today that the Navy now has no attack submarines at sea at all, which are used to defend all the boats and all the operational activity that goes on above ground. Where have they all gone?
Well, they're all stuck in port. You know, two of them have been under refit for at least 2 years. There's only 5 of them in total. And the final one that was at sea, HMS Anson, for some reason or other, has gone back to port and isn't schnorgeling underneath HMS Prince of Wales down in Southeast Asia. It seems that the Americans have taken over that role.
I mean, how vital is this? I don't necessarily understand how the Navy operates. What I do understand, though, is when it comes to protecting the high seas, this seems to be of utmost importance. And I'm not just talking about dinghies coming across the channel, which I'm sure attack submarines aren't necessarily focusing on, but Houthi rebels attacking cargo ships, the Chinese creating random fake news atolls in the middle of the Pacific. So they can turn around and go, this is now Chinese territorial water. The Russian shadow fleet transporting loads and loads of illegal fossil fuels around the world, filling Putin's coffers. I mean, you would think if anything needed to be ship-shape, mind the pun, it's actually the Royal Navy.
Oh, definitely. You know, the surface fleet is okay-ish. You know, they've got 2 aircraft carriers, both are working. HMS Prince of Wales is having a fantastic trip down into Southeast Asia and is doing a lot of good. But there should be a package of ships that support it, and part of that package is a submarine that protects from underneath. And our submarines, we've got effectively 2 types in the UK. We've got our nuclear deterrent submarines, where there's always one of them at sea. They're so old they're creaking, but we're managing to keep one at sea the whole time. They remain hidden. They don't do anything else but just wait for that potential order to fire their nuclear missiles. The others are the nuclear attack submarines, and they protect our seas, they protect our carrier group, and our naval forces are going around, but they also do lots of schnorgeling, going and listening in.
You said schnorgeling twice now, and my ears pricked up the first time you said it, because I'm like, that's a good word. What does schnorgeling mean?
In intelligence gathering. So they will sneak into places that people don't want them to sneak into, and find ways of sniffing what's happening in the atmosphere, and find out what's going on. So you talked about the Chinese threats that there are in Southeast Asia. They're very real. Been able to listen in covertly to Houthi communications if that is needed. There's other ways of doing it, but submarines are good at that. Monitoring the Russian activity. There's a massive series of Russian exercises that are happening with over 150 ships going to sea over the next few weeks from 4 of their 5 fleets. Their 5th fleet is the Black Sea Fleet, which the Ukrainians have managed to decimate.
So maybe we have learnt about that particular military operation through a bit of a schnorgle on the side. I love that word, Phil. That's it. That's now
it's a good word. I love it too. It's a good intelligence gathering word.
Oh, love military jargon. Like, I just learnt the other day that Chinooks are called waka wakas. I think that's so cute. Waka waka. Now, I want to talk about this as well, because if it's not only the fact that our submarines aren't at liberty to schnorgle because they're all back at base having sticking plasters put on them, we now learn that some of our weapons that our troops are using could give them brain damage.
Yeah. Well, that's not surprising. It's nothing new. Whenever you fire, especially the large caliber weapons, these things are not firing Nerf pellets or anything else. They have a big woomph of an explosion. There's another good word, woomph, whenever they fire. And they have another equally big woomph whenever they explode at the other end. But our troops tend to be at the firing end. And it's the blast wave that comes from that. They're suddenly realizing actually causes damage to our troops, not the sort of damage that can be protected with the air defenders that are given, but it causes more blast damage that goes through the brain and is causing brain damage.
So we're basically talking about when you fire off one of these huge ballistics and you're on the other side, you can have whatever earpiece in that you fancy, but your brain's probably going to be rattling around inside your skull like a ping pong machine.
Oh, very much so. And it's not just the really big things. You know, if I remember firing rifles and your head's ringing and rattling, and you spend a day on the range and you've got a good headache at the end of it because you've got a good thump. Up that to mortars and then artillery pieces, and then some of the bigger rockets. Then the amount of vibrating your head is magnified each time.
Wow, I can't imagine what listening to me for 3 hours every day does to people. That's probably a recipe for brain damage.
No comment.
But you know, seriously, what can be done about this? Because look, I adore our men and women in the armed forces. I just think it's one of the most noble things you can do with your life as a profession to serve your country and put yourself in harm's way. So I don't want to detract from that. But you know, I don't see how you can get around firing a gun might rattle your head around.
You can't. You can fix some of these things with the design of more modern weapons, but the important thing is to try and identify if there is actual damage being done that way. You have to remember that most people in the military will go out and play sports and do other things where, you know, they're banging their heads together or they're boxing, and that causes brain damage. So it's getting the research to understand what's happening, exactly why it's happening, and then translate that into the innovations that you can put into weapon design, but also then protective equipment for our soldiers to wear, so that it will make it safer in the future. You know, soldiers, ever since they've invented something that's gone bang, have suffered from these sorts of injuries.
Yeah, you know, as you know, Phil, my other half is a property in Wiltshire, not too far away from Salisbury Plain, and so sometimes when I'm staying there at night, I hear the booms echoing through the night sky. It gets me rather excited, to be honest. I quite like it. Sometimes I sort of go like a little weirdo, walking closer so I can listen to the bangs even more clearly. But when you realise, you get an idea of how loud these things are. I've just come back from Fairford Air Show, and you know, B-1 bomber makes all the car alarms set off because it's that heavy a piece of equipment. Yep. But can you give me a little bit of a positive? I don't know if you can, but I just have this hope somewhere inside that somewhere like Porton Down, there's some very clever wonks, some boffins in a laboratory cooking up some sort of mad supersonic lasers that are going to be the future of warfare, so we can get an upper hand over our adversaries without giving our troops brain damage.
Well, Porton Down is part of the Defence Scientific and Technical Laboratories, and if you ever wanted the weirdest of laboratories filled with conehead type professors, they exist there, and they're not only inventing all of these fascinating lasers. You know, I studied lasers at university, and they're supposed to be a coherent light source at a particular frequency. So theoretically, it's impossible to, or whenever I did my degree, it was impossible to have white lasers. In DSTL, they showed me white lasers, which blew my mind completely. So they're developing these sorts of weird and wonderful weapon systems, and believe me, they are on the invention benches today. They're also developing lots of ways of protecting our troops from cold and blast and everything else. So that work is ongoing, and the UK is probably leading the world in lots of these of these inventions.
That's what I wanted to hear. That's what I wanted to learn. You make me feel so happy when you tell me things like that. Do you know, I would give my right arm to go to Porton Down and have a sniff around. That would be like Alex's ideal day. Phil, thank you ever so much for coming on and talking to me about these subjects. Let's just hope in the future we put a little bit more money into defence and a little less money in bringing our adversaries over and shacking them up in 4-star hotels. That would be a good idea, wouldn't it?